Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Hope everybody's having a great Wednesday afternoon as we're taping this. Greg, looking at some off-ball linebackers today. A lot of familiar faces for SEC fans,
Yeah.
in this class. But at this point, certainly a position of need for the local professional football team, given that Zach Cunningham and David Long are no longer here.
So I guess my question would be, with free agency, it's so funny. I'm so into the draft right now that a lot of times with free agency, after the first, couple of days where it's the main guys, I lose track of who signs where, Buck. And I'm just being honest. So if the season started tomorrow, who would be the two stacked backers for the Titans?
So it'd be Azeez Al-Shaair, who they signed from the
Right,
Niners,
right.
and then Monty Rice out of Georgia, who was a third-round draft pick,
Yeah,
I
who
think,
ended
2
up
years
playing a good
ago.
amount last year. Yeah,
He
yeah,
did. Between him and
yeah,
Dylan Cole out of necessity, I thought they got
yeah.
some good snaps out of both of those
I
guys.
agree with you.
But still a position of need at this point locally, and not necessarily a premium position at this point in the league, but a lot of fun athletes in this group who I know we're going to talk about today.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think about this stuff all the time because we are in a situation, where there's a lot of people and the conversations are often had on Twitter and social media regarding position of needs, allocation of resources. And it's funny because I've, obviously over the years had a chance to talk with many coaches, and coaches don't think of it that way because if you don't have someone who's good at that position. Okay. I had this conversation years ago with a defensive coordinator when safeties were considered a position. Hey, don't draft a safety high. You can get him in the fourth round. You
Right.
may remember that going back, not that many years, quite honestly.
For sure.
And I remember speaking to a defensive coordinator, a very well-known one who's still coaching and has done very well. And he said, the problem with that is if you don't have any that you really feel good about, it limits what you can do with your playbook. That's the thing. See, coaches think about what they have to do on Sundays. People at this time of year start thinking about allocation of resources, premium positions, all these catchphrases that sound really good on Twitter, but coaches don't think like that because they think about what they can do with the players they have. And if you don't have good ones, then they can do less, and that becomes a problem. So, it's easy. Obviously, not every position in terms of a draft or in terms of resources, because there's with the salary cap going up, it's still finite. You can't, have a superstar at every position. But if you don't have someone you feel good about, you get squeezed a little bit.
No, I think it's just one of those great examples of people outside of football overcomplicating things around football. It's not a
Yeah,
complicated thing to understand how coaches view it that way and how they're trying to assess what they have for a particular matchup on that particular Sunday, and then they'll worry about the next opponent
right,
the
right.
following week. And that, of course, is not the way that I think largely a lot of the conversations around what it is that they do
Well,
are had.
and before we get to those backers, it's the Bijan Robinson conversation in this draft.
Yes.
I had a conversation with a good friend of mine yesterday who's in scouting for a team, and we were both saying he really doesn't have a weakness when you look at his tape. And my friend said to me, you know what his weakness is? He's a running back. But other than that, he really doesn't have a weakness. It wouldn't surprise me if he's the best or number 2 or 3 on teams' boards as a player.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean he'll be drafted there, but just as a player, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
I always enjoy getting a look at the different, and at least on the media side of things. But now that we have so many different resources to pull from, Greg, like for example, a website I know you do some work for during the season, the 33rd Team,
Right.
Which is comprised of almost entirely, based on my understanding, of former NFL talent evaluators under Mike Tannenbaum.
A lot. Yep.
And to see, some, like, for example, I saw Broderick Jones, the Georgia offensive tackle, listed as the best player on the latest board that I saw them put out, and just kind of interesting to see how different aspects of the scouting process might view a player or position versus what others might be considered quote unquote common knowledge, when of course it's not common to anybody. It's just based on how the individual team assesses the need in the player in the moment.
No, you're exactly right. And that's what makes all this fun. But I'm always fascinated by people who are outside the business deciding what are important to teams or what should be important to teams and what shouldn't be important to teams.
It's
Yeah.
always good for a laugh, I'm sure, inside these buildings.
Mm.
But no laughing matter, these linebackers. I
Yep.
think to start with the linebacker, I don't know necessarily how I don't necessarily think you stack them, Greg, the way that a lot of people like to. But Drew Sanders out of Arkansas is the player that I'd like to start with. You obviously somebody who SEC fans are going to have a lot of familiarity with. He had an FBS high 7 games last season with at least 5 total tackles and a sack. This dude is active. He's around the football. What does the film say about him?
Yeah, and keep in mind he made the switch to stacked linebacker at Arkansas after spending 2 years at Alabama as an edge pass rusher. And obviously he decided to transfer because they still had Will Anderson and they have Dallas Turner, who's likely to be a top 10 or top 15 pick next year. I thought he consistently showed the traits needed to play at a pretty high level. I mean, he almost always aligned to the passing strength of the offensive formation. And for a player who has not really played stacked linebacker before, Buck, I thought he showed a quick trigger in the run game. I thought he saw things pretty well. The concern when a player doesn't play off the ball is that's a whole different worldview from playing on the ball. It expands your view. You have to see more things, and you have to be able to diagnose more things more quickly. And I thought that he showed an ability to do that. Now, did it happen every single time? Of course not, because he was new to the position. But he showed short area explosiveness to slip blocks without losing any gap integrity, stayed in his gap, but slipped blocks. He's aggressive. He took on blocks. He's a big man. He's almost 6'5", 235. I would bet he could probably gain 5-10 pounds without that being a problem. He played fast. Great play speed, pursuit range, made a lot of plays running down people. He's very competitive. I think he can develop into kind of an impact playmaker type. Now, he needs to improve his tackling. That was a little bit of an issue. And he was also used as a pass rusher. And because he has pass rush in his background, he had some really strong pass rushes. But at his core, he was a stacked linebacker a year ago at Arkansas. I'm pretty sure that's the way teams will see him. But he certainly can line up on the ball and rush the quarterback.
Well, and that I think that gives him, for example, the first thing that pops into my mind is the way that they like to run here in Tennessee, for example,
Right.
those zone exchange pressures that we talk
Oh, yeah.
about, where
Yeah.
David Long would
Yep.
be the 4th rusher in a certain situation, and they might drop Bud Dupree or whomever the outside linebacker in any particular situation where they chose to use one of those pressures. That's immediately the skill set that pops into my head.
And it's a great point because they did that a ton. When Elijah Molden was healthy, the 2 players who were used as 4th rushers when they went to these zone exchange concepts, meaning they still only rushed 4, but the 4th rusher was either a corner or a safety or a linebacker. And the 2 players who were the predominant 4th rusher when they did this concept was Elijah Molden and David Long. So, Sanders could certainly, if he were to be there and play, he certainly could fill that role as a 4th rusher because he is a very good pass rusher.
That size though, Greg, and I haven't seen as much of him as I'm certain that you have at this point, but are there any limitations to an off-ball linebacker at that size, I guess, when you watch him as far as the movement is concerned? Is there anywhere where that might be something that would be a hindrance to him?
Um, normally players that size, you don't describe them as sudden and twitchy.
Sure.
They're more measured in their movement. So, but that's just a function of the fact that most players who are 6'4" plus would be described like that. That's kind of the way they are. But no, there's been, look, when you think, and I'm not comparing him, I'm just thinking of players. Luke Kuechly was 6'4". Tremaine Edmonds, who just signed with the Bears, who was with Buffalo, he's 6'5". There have been tall, stacked linebackers who played extremely well in this league. And in fact, I know that Luke Kuechly he's working with Jack Campbell, who's a 6'5" stacked backer from Iowa, who could go end of day 1, early day 2. So there are examples of tall, stacked linebackers who can be very effective.
It's like Greg knows where we're going next because we're getting ready to talk about Jack Campbell. I actually saw Luke Kuechly at the combine, Greg. I don't know if you did in any of your interactions with people, but I mean, he still looks like I know he retired at a younger age than the average NFL player because I know he
Yep.
was concerns about concussions, but he still looks like he could get out there, and I'm sure he's a great resource for somebody like Jack Campbell.
And Jack Campbell was one of my most fun players to watch on tape. He played stack backer in Iowa's defense. And he's predominantly a box guy. He's a great run defender. I mean, this guy has great size. He was 6'5", 249. And he tested far better than I think some people thought. He ran well. His 10-yard split was tremendous because most people don't see him as a, quick guy in the middle. They see him more as a long player, and there's a difference. But he's a great run defender. This guy's got size. He's got physicality. When you talk to someone like Coach Mack, he always talks about stack and shed with stacked linebackers. And that's something that Campbell did extremely well, took on blocks, shed blocks. Now, he was a guy that saw things at a really high level, key and diagnose. He could read and react to things. Sometimes it required patience, and he was great at that. Sometimes it required decisiveness, and he was great at that. He just showed an innate feel for when to attack and when to let it sort of happen. And he rarely got stuck in traffic. He just had such a great feel, Buck, for working his way through the box to find the football. There were just not that many snaps where you said, wow, he's just stuck. It just seems like there's too many people around him and he can't find the ball. I think that he's a really good prospect. He's a really good underneath zone defender. The one question you would have about him is, can he play man to man against quality tight ends? That would be a projection at this point. But I think down the road, he will absolutely be a 3-down linebacker once he gains experience.
Well, you brought up the testing numbers, and I think he blew a lot of people, maybe not blew a lot of people away, but definitely
I think he did. I think he
performed
did.
exceptionally
Yeah.
well. And I guess a conversation around him, Greg, is does he play up to those testing numbers is probably the way that
And
I
I
would
would,
put it.
and it's a great question. And I would say yes more often than not. Because
Okay.
keep in mind, when you're 6'5", 249, so essentially he's 6'5", 250, okay?
Right.
You're not going to necessarily look like you're playing really fast. It's not like watching, shorter players and smaller players that just look twitchy and sudden. I mean, he's not going to look like that. He's going to look more calculated in his movement than explosive in his movement. But he made a ton of plays in pursuit outside the numbers. I mean, he was not just a box player who played with no range. He made a ton of players outside the numbers. And keep in mind, stride length is a trait. And when he would start to move and run, he got there in a hurry. He covered ground in a hurry because of that stride length being 6'5". So as I said, that is a trait. And I know exactly what you said. And there's a lot of people who said the same thing and were blown away by his testing numbers because they didn't expect it. But he's a really good football player. Sometimes when you watch a guy, and we all do, the people like myself who do this, and sit and watch tape. We obviously jot down traits and take notes and all that. But sometimes you just come away from watching a guy and say, you know what? He's a really good football player.
That's all it's got to be at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you just say that when you watch a guy.
So another guy that I'm sure you have seen at this point, Deion Henley,
Yeah.
who was one of the most impressive players in the Pac-12 this year, certainly one of the most impressive defensive players in the country coming out of Washington State. 12 tackles for loss and an interception last season. In fact, he was the only player in that conference with at least 100 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, and a pick. What do you like about him and the way that he was used within that defense?
Well, are you aware that he came out of high school, Crenshaw High School in LA, which is a pretty famous high school? He began his college career at Nevada, where he was a wide receiver. He played wide receiver for 2 years at Nevada. Then they moved him to safety, okay? And then he got hurt. And so he's only played linebacker for 2 years, okay? let's see, maybe 3 years, but 2022 was his only season at Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he's really only played 2 full seasons at stacked linebacker. This guy is really fun to watch. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. You've probably seen a little bit of him. I mean, he is a compact, sudden, supercharged, competitive athlete with great play speed, great range. I mean, his activity and energy level, I mean, he looks like he is freaking shot out of a cannon. I mean, this guy is only going to get better and better because he's not played linebacker that much. I mean, I really enjoyed watching him. I think that first of all, he's got really, really long arms for the position. He's only 6'1", and his arm length is 33 inches. And when you see a guy like that, and I thought he used his long arms effectively to maintain distance from offensive linemen, and that kept his feet clean. See, when it comes back to what I'm sure you've talked with Coach Mack about this, and I have over the years about linebackers. You want to be able to stack guys and shed guys so you can move freely. And arm length helps you do that. Because if you can extend your arms and keep an offensive lineman off your body, then you can shed that offensive lineman a lot more easily than if he's right in your grill. And he's got long arms and he understood how to use them.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of those players who I watched a few about maybe a half a game worth of his snaps, and then just kind of continued to watch and wanted to watch then more games after
Right.
that. One of these
He's that kind of
prospects that
guy,
we talk
isn't he?
about, the same
Yeah,
way that
yeah,
you and I have discussed all year long. He was one where I had to seek out more. I was just having so much fun watching him
yep.
specifically.
Yeah, he's that kind of guy, Buck. You're 100% right. I didn't know what to expect at all. I
Right.
didn't know, look, I'm on the East Coast. I'm not sitting up on ESPN at 11 o'clock at night watching Washington State football.
Not unless you're chasing, right?
Yeah, no. So, I didn't know much about him. I didn't even know his background until I researched it to find out that he was a receiver. But, look, guys who don't play the position, are there going to be moments where they don't see it as clearly as guys who've been playing it all their lives? Of course. But I didn't find him to be a guy where I said, man, he just doesn't see it. Because that's the easy thing to say if you don't study him, that, oh, well, his play recognition is bad. Well, does he have more to learn? Of course he does. He hasn't played it that long. But it wasn't as if he didn't see things. And I got to tell you, he has a quick trigger in the run game. When he saw it, his movement was sudden and explosive, both downhill and laterally. He played fast with urgency. I mean, just like you said, when you started watching him, he is a fun guy to watch.
Yeah, no, tough to turn off. It's like we talk about all the time, Greg. None of these guys are finished products before they get to
Nope.
the NFL.
Great point.
And he is one who may just take a little more time because he just started,
Yeah.
as you said. One more player I'd like to ask you about,
Sure.
Greg. I assume you've seen Henry To'oTo'o
I have.
at this point in the evaluation process, and obviously Tennessee fans having familiarity with him from years past. He's incredibly tough. He's incredibly productive. I wonder what you make of him when you watch him on tape.
Yeah. Henry, he's a little smaller than you'd like.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't run great. I mean, obviously, as you probably know, because he started at Tennessee, he came out of a big time high school on the West Coast, a national power, De La Salle High School. Started 2 years at Tennessee before transferring and started 2 years at Alabama. So he's got 50 starts in his college career. That is a boatload.
Right.
I would say that he's smooth, he's fluid in his movement, he always plays under control, he never looks hurt, he looks like a comfortable player. I would say he's more of a scrape and flow linebacker than an aggressive physical linebacker who's going to play through contact. He's less than 230 pounds. He's a good athlete, not a great athlete. I think that his play speed and range is above average, but not, wow, look at that guy run. So, ultimately, I didn't think he had everything that you would want for a guy that's essentially a stacked backer and who is lighter. See, that's the thing. When you're lighter, you want to see a little more juice. You'd love to see a little more physicality in his game. I think he's a steady, smart player. But every once in a while, I thought that, it's funny, you talk about not seeing it really clearly. I
Right.
thought that there were too many snaps where he got caught up in traffic and could not get to the ball. Don't forget he can't shed people as well because he's just not as big. So, I thought that I'm not sure he's a starting linebacker in the NFL. Certainly not early in his career. Maybe I'll be wrong.
No, I was getting ready to ask you about the recognition, because there are times where he'll get caught up, as you said, at least
Yeah,
that you notice from the untrained eye like mine. And then even the thing that's easier, I think, for somebody like me to discern is, oh, he doesn't have necessarily the recovery speed
he
or the
doesn't.
athleticism to make up for when he makes those mistakes. And that, I think, is what catches. It
Yeah.
looks like a bigger error than it might have otherwise
And
been.
you know what? That's a great point. And he's smooth, so it looks like he's playing fast.
Right.
But smooth and fluid is different from fast.
Yeah.
And he is a comfortable mover. He looks very comfortable moving, but he doesn't have great play speed and range.
Well, there's a lot more fun off-ball linebackers that are in
Ah,
this draft class, and
there's a ton of
unfortunately,
them. Yeah.
well, is there one that we may not, or I assume we're not going to get to them and further down the draft process, because Greg, we're less than a month away at this stage. But is there one who you've particularly enjoyed watching that you'd like to bring up before we?
Well, there's another guy who just jumped into my head. Again, I can't think of every guy right now,
Sure.
but there's a kid from Tulane named Dorian Williams. He's a little undersized as well. But this guy I think he fits that profile of the scrape and flow, run and hit backer. He's got really good play speed, and he can play inside out, sideline to sideline with range. And that's what he will be at the next level. And I think couple of years down the road, he could be a starting linebacker. He ran really well. Um, you know, who he reminded me of when I watched him, and you'll remember this player because it's the SEC and he's been in the league for a while. He reminded me of Quan Alexander when he came
Oh
out of
yeah.
LSU, who was a smaller linebacker, also under 230 pounds, and he became a day one starter for the Tampa Bay Bucks, who drafted him, and in his second year had about 150 tackles. And Alexander's still in the league. Dorian Williams kind of reminded me of Quan Alexander coming out of LSU.
I like that as a comparison. That's a fun. I remember Quan obviously in college, and then has been with several different teams at this
Yeah,
point. Was a Niner for a hot second. I think the
yeah, he
Saints
was a
most recently.
Niner. Was it the Jets with the Saints? Yep,
Jets.
he's been
Okay.
around.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Greg Cosell's been around. That's why we like the insight and analysis that he always brings to the table. Greg, great stuff as always. I appreciate catching up with you, buddy. And sounds like by the time we meet next week, we'll have a cool thing for people to hear about, because I know they've kind of got me in a holding pattern until next week to tell more people about
Oh,
it. But I know
okay.
we're both excited about what we know is
Well, it's a
going to
good thing
happen
I've
here in
been
the
told.
future.
It's a good thing I've been told.
Yeah, listen. Very rarely do I get told about these things until like 3 or 4 days before. So the fact that I know means that we're getting closer that for everybody to know, I think, at this stage.
There you go.
All right, Greg. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, Buck.